down to defeat both amendments defeated by the Senate's Democrat majority in party line votes. Democrat majority. Once again, an example of what I say all the time. The Democrats seem to be dead set on governing against the mandate given to the President of the United States in the presidential election cycle of 2024. Here to talk about these and some of the other stories in the news with me is the very influential and highly knowledgeable Jim Pfaff. He is the president of the Conservative Caucus, and Jim is a nationally recognized public policy leader, and we are once again happy to welcome you, Jim, to this program. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us.
Glad to be here, Darryl.
Glad that you could. Jim, there are a lot of things going on, and we only have a limited amount of time to talk with you about them. Among them, the battle over the continuing resolution, but the good news about the economy that came out yesterday and the tariff wars that are raging between the United States and several countries, but most specifically Canada at this particular point in time. Let's start with the battle over the continuing resolution, because that's occupying the news cycle right this minute, where you have Mr. Schumer over in the Senate saying that he is not going to direct the Democrats in the upper chamber to support the continuing resolution sent to them from the House, where only one Democrat supported it. But, Jim, I would simply say that does technically qualify it as a bipartisan bill, does it not?
Well, yeah, technically. But keep in mind, whenever Democrats are saying they want bipartisan legislation, what they mean is they want Democrat legislation.
Mm-hmm.
See, because they do not ever compromise off their own position. They demand Republicans compromise on theirs, and then they call everything Republicans do radical and over the top, and it never is, because Republicans don't go as far as they ought to. So this it's so funny, because I don't know if you noticed this, but there are dozens of Democrat senators out there who have repeated exactly the same ex post, and they're putting it in other places too, where they say, I stand firmly with a 4-week continuing resolution to stop the harmful cuts. And they're also saying that, it's giving Elon power, and it's doing none of this, and the cuts aren't harmful. So this is day 52 of Democrats for the bureaucrats. Mm-hmm. That's essentially what you're hearing right now.
Absolutely. This was what Chuck Schumer, the guy over in the Senate, who says, no, we're not going to support it. We want our own version of the bill, and unless we get that, we're going to shut the government down, said.
Funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass. We should vote on that. I hope our Republican colleagues will join us to avoid a shutdown on Friday. I yield the floor.
Do you think, Jim, that Mr. Schumer is dead set on enacting a government shutdown? Because that looks like where we're headed based on what we hear him saying.
It sure sounds like it. And what's taking place here is he is not honestly trying to appeal to the American people. He is not seeking to work with Republicans on anything, as I just alluded to before. And what he's doing is trying to put pressure on John Thune, because he knows that Republicans typically cave. Mm-hmm. Now, hopefully that won't happen, because the one different factor we have here is we don't have a Democrat in the White House, and we don't have a wimpy Republican either. We've got a guy who is taking leadership. Donald Trump is taking leadership on this. And even though I don't want to see a government shutdown, because I want Tom Homan to continue to have a free hand of getting criminal illegals out of this country, and it could hamper those efforts for a time. Nonetheless, I personally am willing to go there because it's going to be a Democrat shutdown. He was not complaining about bipartisanship weeks ago. They were sitting on their hands, and they are the ones that don't want to work. So that's the situation there, and they should be wanting to work. They're losing the debate. Americans want these cuts, and listen, we're keeping 2024 levels in this. It's not like there are any cuts at all. It's zero cuts. So what it does is it keeps automatic increases from happening, which he doesn't like, that will allow a 6-month period by the end of the fiscal year for Donald Trump to be able to put out a recision bill, which only needs a simple majority to pass, even in the Senate, and then a reconciliation bill, which can take care of some other structural changes. This is what the American people want. They're 70% backing DOGE and everything that Donald Trump is doing in this regard.
It's mystifying as to why Mr. Schumer at this particular point in time, especially when you've heard from some other Democrats, namely John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania, saying that he is not dedicated to the proposition of burning down the village. I quote him directly, burning down the village to save the village, end quote. In other words, he's voting for the continuing resolution. I wonder just how many other Democrats in the Senate feel the way he does, Jim.
Well, he knows that he has to face Pennsylvania voters, which pretty solidly for Pennsylvania voted for Donald Trump. But also keep in mind what else is happening here that Chuck Schumer's not going to talk about. Democrats are destroying everything. Not only do they play a major role in putting us on a path to destruction in our federal spending and $39 trillion of debt coming up here pretty soon, but they're out destroying Tesla showrooms. They're out destroying Trump. They were down in Trump Tower causing a ruckus. The Democrats are always destroying. They're never creating and building up. They do not believe that the American people need the kind of freedom to allow them to undertake entrepreneurial effort, to grow in their careers, to be able to expand the beauty of this American economy that can allow everyone to succeed. They're not for that. They believe in the destruction that government brings. They steal our money through taxes.
Yes.
And they steal our productivity through regulation and various other things. And by expanding our debt so far that it could destroy our country in general.
Absolutely. And, man, I wish we had even more time because when you talk about stealing the taxpayer dollar, I'd like to get into a discussion with you about that $20 billion set aside in the previous administration that is now being discovered in all kinds of places, not the least of which includes bank accounts with Citibank. But we'll leave that for another time. Good economic news coming out the other day with regard to the consumer price index. Inflation down to 2.8%, below 3%, and it looks as if the trend, Jim, is for it to continue downward, and it looks like we might even be on the threshold of mortgage affordability because we could see mortgage rates drop if the current trends continue. Energy prices down, transportation prices down. Good news for the Americans just since Donald Trump has taken office. But some might say, hey, these are trends that are holdovers from the previous administration. What say you?
They're not at all. There was a brief period in the fall, of last year under the Biden administration where inflation was creeping down, and then it popped up precipitously before Donald Trump took office. Now it's dumped even further below that. And let me tell you where I'm getting this information from. You can't always trust government numbers. One thing you can trust is someone that monitors the prices of millions of articles, and that's trueflation.com. I would encourage anyone to go there. Right now, the Trueflation Index has been dropping precipitously. When you look, though, at overall numbers, the Producer Price Index, which is the number that helps track the cost of doing business, of creating things in the economy, both services and manufacturing, that number is going down right now. Rents are going down as well, which is an indicator potentially of some mortgage movement. Gasoline prices, though, they're down over a year ago from $3.38 a gallon average to $3.07, and oil is down. Oil is precipitously down from about $72 last year at this time to now below $70 in the $67 range. There are a lot of numbers that look pretty decent, even as this tariff situation begins to unfold.
I've admonished my audience that it takes time to churn the ship of state, economically speaking, especially when the incoming administration has to implement policy. That being the case, one of the policies being implemented, to which you just alluded, is the tariff policy that has created what the media love to refer to as the tariff war, trade war, now taking place between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, more specifically of late between the U.S. and Canada. How do you see that affecting things going forward?
Well, the Canada situation is going to affect Canada alone and not us. There'll be little tweaky things like the premier of Ontario saying he's going to cut off electricity because we do receive some electricity from their area. But the thing is, and it affects people in Michigan too, I grant that. But the thing is, all of that's going to get worked out. Canada cannot sustain a trade war with the United States. But in a broader perspective, whatever the short-term results of the tariff situation will be, in the long run, we have an opportunity to entirely reset trade around the world.
Yes.
We have been somewhat governed by the World Trade Organization, by the USMCA that Donald Trump got passed to change the NAFTA agreement here in North America, and other regulatory bodies around the world that negotiate all these trade terms. What we need are unilateral arrangements with individual countries that we have a reciprocal trade set up. You know, I come from the kind of Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, von Mises wing of the economic policy. I totally take into Austrian economics. Now, there has been people in that camp who have decried tariffs as a horrible thing. But the one thing that really upset me about these people for some time is that they don't understand. The tariff situation is always us reducing our tariffs while every other country does just fine, but they call it free trade for us to reduce our tariffs. And that is not right.
That's right. And a lot of people don't understand the draconian, high amounts of tariffs that we in this country are paying to those countries when it comes to the trade. It's about time we Americans were better educated in this regard. Jim Pfaff is president of the Conservative Caucus. Check them out online, theconservativecaucus.org. And you may want to check out Jim's reference to trueflation.com. Jim, it has, as always, been enlightening. I can't wait till our next conversation. Be well, my friend.
Thanks, Darryl. Great to be with you.
Thank you.